We're back to the stove, and I have a heavy skillet with a little bit of olive oil, extra virgin if you have it, is good quality. And I'm going to add the onions to the pan. We're not looking for these to caramelize, we're just looking for them to get a teensy bit of color as well, soften nicely. I really feel strongly that if you skip this step, there is a component of the flavor profile that you lose. Now this is our opportunity to season. Remember, we always season in layers. Meaning, if we have onions, we want the onions to be seasoned. After we have the tomatoes, we're going to season those. At this step, it's a good amount of salt we're going to use. Let's say a teaspoon. And my favorite spice, fresh ground pepper. Not too much at this point because we got a good deal of cooking to go to adjust our seasoning. And remember, we haven't even added our tomatoes yet. Started out on high heat. I've turned down the flame just a little bit. And what I want to do is I want to let these, oh, there's a little piece of onion skin. We don't want that. For me, all it takes is one bad flavor, one bad texture in my mouth. So we don't want any seeds. We don't want any onion skin. And remember, we're not trying to caramelize these like we would for an onion soup. Rather, we're looking to soften them and just give them a little bit of color. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, these onions will be ready for the next step. We're about halfway through the cooking process of the onions. And as you can see, there's no color. Like I said, we really don't want that. What we do want is we just want the onions to start to soften, melt down, and get to about the same texture as the tomatoes are. That way, at the end of the cooking process, we will have a sauce that is equal in texture of the onion and the tomato and pleasant. So when I come back, we're going to add the tomatoes. We're going to take a break. We've had these in here about maybe 6 minutes, and we have nicely softened onions. I've tasted them. The salt and the pepper is good at this point, so we will add our tomatoes. I lost a piece there. And our reserved liquid from the tomato, about half. Now remember, the rest of that tomato juice is going to be added back in the end for a little burst of fresh tomato flavor. Now before we get that all mixed up, let's season our tomatoes. I usually add the salt and the pepper in smaller quantities than I believe it needs because remember, the sauce has a good deal of cooking and we've got lots of opportunity to adjust the flavoring. Now, the last ingredient, now look at, I got a little piece of core. I'm constantly on the lookout for things that I think might be an unpleasant texture or flavor. We'll add that back in. With a little bit of water, maybe 2 cups. Another little piece of core there. And this sauce is going to begin to cook over low heat. I cooked my sauce for about 45 minutes. And during that process, several times I checked the consistency and I may need to add water. So we're going to take a break and we're going to let these tomatoes and onions and salt and pepper get happy for the next stage. I've let the tomato sauce cook for quite some time now, and there's a lot of good things happening in this pot. I wish you could smell this. The wonderful aroma of the fresh tomato. Absolutely delicious. But we're not done yet. Just want to call attention to the texture of the sauce. Now, I haven't used a immersion blender or a blender of any kind. We've just cooked this long enough that the tomato and the onion have begun to break down and become a chunky sauce. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is the way I like my sauce. Whether it's on pizza, with some pasta, or added into various other dishes or soups. I like there to be a little bit of a texture to it. But if you'd like, take an immersion blender and go at it. Put a little bit, make it a little bit smooth. I don't recommend blending it all up because that kind of takes the character away from the tomato. It's beautiful red color, and from that 2 or 3 teaspoons of tomato paste, you know that my rich color is from the wonderful tomatoes that we used. And the technique of slowly concentrating the flavor, cooking it down, adding water. What we're left with is the wonderful tomato concasse, onion. You could still see it in there. I like that. Now, here's what we're going to do. Remember that tomato juice that we reserved earlier? That's going to add a burst of wonderful tomato flavor. And my secret, just as I have 2 different kinds of olive oil that I use in my kitchen, I have 2 different kinds of balsamic vinegar. I have eating balsamic vinegar that I will drizzle over, let's say, cheese or fruit. Then I have cooking balsamic vinegar, less expensive, but still decent quality. And we're just going to put 2 tablespoons of decent quality balsamic vinegar along with that fresh tomato juice. And stir that up a little bit. I like the balsamic vinegar richens the flavor. And we're done. Our finished product is a wonderful homogenized, chunky, rich red tomato sauce bursting with tomato flavor, predominant onion, and a perfect accompaniment to pasta, pizza, or as a base for about 100 different dishes. Fresh tomato sauce. My way.